Hello, welcome. It's me, Martin Anderson. This is Headlocks and Headphones, and you already knew that. So, joining me on today's show, I'm going to have two separate guests, although sadly, not the guest I actually planned on having today, which was, of course, Stuart Murphy, who's decided he doesn't want to do an interview this week either. But we're going to ignore that. Apparently, we do have something interesting coming with him very soon. But I didn't want to do the show on my own this week. Now, last week, Zoey Styles did catch up with her homework. She did Mr. Nanny. We also had some footage from Gordy, who joined us. So this week, we're going to try and do the show in kind of almost one go. We're going to talk about wrestling news. We're going to talk about all the big shows that happened. We're going to skip over Impact because, again, I haven't caught up with that this week. But the Good Brothers apparently doing some good stuff over there, as are the Motor City Machine Guns. So we will catch up with that in the coming weeks, because I am excited for what's happening in Impact. There's just not enough hours in the day to fit everything in. So with all the big shows that have been happening this week, we are going to catch up. However, joining me on this week's show, hopefully, as we try and rely on technology, will be Zoey Styles as she comes in. Hello, Zoey. How are you?
Hello, I'm well. Yourself?
Well, it's been a long day, but before we get complaining about how long a day it's been, let's talk about some of the wrestling news. Now, I know you have to put up with talking about wrestling all the time with me, so I thought rather than just doing the wrestling news kind of on my own, I'd get you to join in this week so we can kind of talk about all the news stories as we're going and hopefully get some opinion from you as well, because normally it's just me talking about it and then you talking about AEW. But this week, because we haven't done one together in over a month, have we?
No, I don't think so. It'll be fun to do a show together, and I'm not just stuck giving the AEW highlights and complaining.
Yeah, now you've got AEW highlights and complaining and dealing with me.
But I've got no homework this week, so there we go.
Yeah, so we're going to have to maybe discuss some homework for you later on. So we'll discuss that on the fly, because even I don't know what homework you're getting. However, talking of homework, it appears WWE are really kind of struggling with getting their homework done. Now, as a university student, if I was to show up to class and not have my work done and be trying to do it whilst the class was running, you'd fail, wouldn't you? I mean, there's no way you'd pass that class.
I got kicked out of a class for doing that once.
I got kicked out of class. I won't talk about that. That was the censorship essay that had some swearing in it. Anyway, so this week, WWE Raw, the script wasn't finished until an hour after they went on air. And watching the Raw show this week, I can see that. I mean, there was so much happening in that first hour that just seemed so disorganized. And then hours 2 and 3 seemed so different. This is how WCW failed. And Wrestling Observer Radio, Dave Meltzer stated, Vince McMahon was on the phone with creative all day before arriving at the Amway Center at 7 p.m. By the time the script was finalized, Raw was already an hour in. A lot of the show was changed, with most of it being throughout the day, and some items finished up during the aforementioned airing of the program. The underground segments were taped in the afternoon, so that was pretty much unchanged. But one fight viewers missed was Ivar versus Bobby Lashley, something that was hyped a week in advance. For whatever reason, that was cancelled, which was likely in the morning. Again, the WWE advertising something they're not bringing through on that promise. This is all very WCW. It all seems a bit disorganized.
I think it's unfair to say WWE, because although WWE as a conglomerate is of course a business and they're responsible for everything that happens on Raw, we all know who exactly is responsible for these changes and last minute alterations. There's not a team of 10 people sat in a room going, do you know what, this script isn't that great. There's one person going, I don't like this, let's scrap it and do it again.
And that, I think for me, that's a problem. If you're tweaking something, if you're saying, oh, Randy Orton versus Keith Lee, I think halfway through the match we need to maybe have Drew McIntyre come out and cause a distraction, that's a tweak. Whereas Vince is just ripping up entire things and taking stuff they've advertised and going, well, just don't mention it. They won't remember. And that pissed off WCW fans. Now, there are rumors, of course, that WWE plan on putting Shane McMahon in charge of the Raw brand. So I want to get your opinion. Do you think Shane being in charge of Raw would be a good idea?
I think that he's certainly getting back in the limelight by doing his Raw Underground segments, and it wouldn't be a stretch for him to start appearing on Raw. and then gradually it kind of just moves in a new direction. But I'm a little concerned with any big changes, considering the amount of creative geniuses that they've had in, and then, for lack of a better word, screwed over. They had Bischoff move to the other side of the country. They had Heyman involved for an age, and then just all of a sudden it was, wait, no, we don't like Heyman anymore, so we're going to move somewhere different. And it makes the show seem a bit staggered and unpolished.
I mean, for me, that's the same with football. If you look at certain football clubs, if they don't get results in 6 months, they're looking to change managers, when sometimes you can't get results instantly. Sometimes it's best to play the long game. Jim Cornette said, let's not look at what you want to draw next month at the Omni. Let's look at what you want to draw next year at Starrcade. And then we can get to there. Because I think there's one issue that I have with WWE's booking, and it's certainly something that Vince McMahon has been guilty of recently, is they come up with a plan and then they decide to change it. And then when they decide to change it, it becomes so erratic compared to what was there before that when Vince decides he isn't happy with that, it just seems so much like the chopping and changing becomes a problem.
I mean, you just have to look at the Braun Strowman documentary, like the WrestleMania one, where he's telling the story of him traveling 10 hours home in a car to then get a phone call and say, hey, I know you just got home, but there's a plane waiting for you at the airport. We need you for WrestleMania.
And he goes in and he ends up winning the title, which is one of those things where obviously, things change, pal. It's one of those Vinceisms where there's WWE needs to be unpredictable. We shouldn't be able to predict where everything's going, and I agree with that. But one of the problems for me with WWE is that it should be predictable for It shouldn't be predictable for the fans, but it should be predictable for creative. Creative should know this is where we're going for Survivor Series. We already have the plans for WrestleMania, and this person may get injured, but you're then tweaking one match. You're not tweaking the whole card because Vince has decided that his hemorrhoid cream isn't working that day, so he's going to piss everybody else off. Now, let's move to something different. I don't know how you're feeling about the latest series of WWE games. Obviously, you reviewed a wrestling game the other week. How did you find reviewing an old game?
I actually really enjoyed it. Do you know what? Because I went back, although I do own the game, I went back and watched some of the YouTube videos, and I had a look at the graphics and the gameplay, and was able to actually just watch it without having to be involved. And it holds up, as strange as that sounds.
They do mock the WWE games, and I think until 2K Games came on board, you were mocking them because there maybe was not enough new content. But the last WWE game was awful, and that's led to WWE obviously cancelling their games for this year and deciding to go with 2K Battlegrounds, which is a franchise that they've done with basketball as well, which is designed to be a little bit more arcadey. And it's been announced this week that Jerry the King Lawler and Mauro Ranallo are going to be the commentators for that game. They've announced some most of the roster for it. There's a small roster going to be released on release date, and the rest are going to be DLCs. I don't know if they're going to be paid DLCs or just timed releases, which WWE sometimes have done with games before. But some of the names that are going to be featured in this include Undertaker, Mankind, Beth Phoenix, and the Bellas. There's also going to be Roman Reigns, Drew McIntyre, Bayley, Sasha Banks, Finn Balor. There is, of course, several names like Bret Hart, DDP, I believe, is in there. Jake the Snake. The DDP and Jake the Snake names, obviously, that showed up before their appearances long-term with AEW. I know Bret Hart had one appearance with AEW, but largely he's still a WWE guy, and he is somebody that I will play Battlegrounds just to play as Bret Hart, but I don't know if I want to own the game simply to play as Bret Hart. Having seen some of the trailers leading up to the release, what do you think of this new game?
I think it's exactly what it says in the tin. It's very arcadey. It's designed as a stopgap, something that you would have your friends round with a couple of beers, obviously not under the circumstances at the moment, but in general, if you had a couple of mates around, a couple of beers, and you're passing time playing Battlegrounds, could be a very entertaining hour or two. but it's not something you're going to pour 200 hours into like you would with one of the 2K games.
Now, we'll move on slightly, but Mauro Ronaldo obviously is the next story I want to talk about. Mauro Ronaldo missed the NXT TakeOver this week. Apparently, there were some family issues. There's also been some commentary changes as it relates to NXT. Beth Phoenix obviously is recording her content online, so she isn't actually at the NXT tapings. Mauro Ronaldo has been doing the same. This week, I believe it's Vic Joseph and Wade Barrett who are actually going to be the commentators for NXT. Wade Barrett, Stu Bennett, who is actually the commentator for NWA. So interesting to see him showing up in WWE, and because they've taped 2 weeks, he's actually on the commentary team for 2 full episodes of NXT. So it's going to be interesting to see how he does, particularly obviously the absence of Nigel McGuinness in recent weeks, in recent months from NXT is a big loss. I think the Mauro Ronaldo Nigel McGuinness chemistry is really good. Are you looking forward to the Wade Barrett commentary and seeing what he's like, because he's a good talker?
See, you've just taken the point straight out of my mouth. I am a Wade Barrett fan. I like Stu Bennett a lot, and I think that he is very good on the mic. His promos were hilarious, and it'll be fun to see a fresh face on the system that isn't just going to kind of go, okay, yes, no, this is this, that is that, and therefore this happened.
Well, do you want to know what really bugs me about WWE commentary right now? When Vic Joseph debuted on Raw, I said to you week 1, he sounds like Michael Cole. And when Tom Phillips debuted on SmackDown, I remember saying to you, do you know what? He sounds like Michael Cole. And all the commentary sounds the same. I think that's why Mauro Ronaldo stands out. Because Mauro Ronaldo is enough of a name that you can just go, do you know what? Mamma mia! And if it's not good, then tell him it's not good and he'll move on. But don't expect him to be Michael Cole, because that's not who he is. And I think
it's similar with the likes of FIFA. You know, you play it every single year and you've got the same 2 guys in the box telling you that you missed that shot, or the goal was too wide, or one player tackled another. And some of the games just kind of melt into each other, and it's the same with the Raw shows and the SmackDown shows. After a while, you shut up.
I think part of the problem with FIFA, particularly in WWE as well, is they actually leave some commentary in year upon year. So it does sound the same all the time because it's the same commentary. But I don't know if you remember, there was actually an outtake that was left in the last WWE game. So as Jerry Lawler's commentating, he actually messed up his line. And he's like, oh, I'm sorry, do you want to do that again? And they left that in, which either somebody has a really big sense of humor or they're really bad at quality control at 2K Sports. Now, talking of quality control, I have this habit of making it seem like I've kind of planned out the order of the news stories. I promise I haven't. But having seen AEW, I'm interested in which version you actually saw, because there was an Eddie Kingston promo. Now, I've said before, and I've told Eddie Kingston on Twitter, I did not like him. Back when CM Punk and everybody was in Ring of Honor, that kind of era, and I'm seeing Eddie Kingston floating around various companies, didn't like him. See, when I look back on his stuff now, he's probably the most believable guy of that era, and the only reason WWE didn't hire him is because he doesn't look like a wrestler. He just looks like your friend's brother who fights. So when he went to AEW, I was ecstatic, because for me, I think Eddie Kingston is one of the good guys. And I don't mean a good guy because he can be a dick. I mean, he's one of the good guys in wrestling, particularly the match he had against Cody Rhodes was great. Now, one of the things that's quite interesting is, did he mention Rey Mysterio in the version that you watched of AEW this week?
Not that I know of. What he did say was that he thought that Phoenix was the best luchador around.
Okay, so
I was quite intrigued with this section of the show because I've never seen Eddie Kingston, and they basically eat a loss to the other team, and he just comes out and basically tells them off and says, like, what the hell were you playing at? You know, you guys are some of the best wrestlers. You were fantastic on the indie scene. Where's your drive gone?
I mean, for me, he's one of the most believable guys in wrestling. And it's not because he has this outrageous gimmick. It's not because he'll tell you himself, he's not the greatest technical wrestler. He's not the greatest high flyer. He's not the greatest on the mic. But he's so good at everything that he does. And he knows what he can't do, so he stays away from it. And to hear that you've kind of been excited by the stuff he's doing actually fills me with joy to know that it's not just me liking somebody. There's other people out there that like him. But apparently, on the original version of the show, he mentioned Rey Mysterio, and they had to edit that off of the taped promo. So it's interesting because I think Butcher and Blade Butcher and Blade and Lucha Brothers, they've not been booked very well. So to see Eddie Kingston kind of coming in and trying to cause some trouble is interesting. But to know that he actually went out there, and I'm guessing that wasn't scripted if it ended up getting cut. But here's I mean, I don't understand why you would cut the name of somebody who's in another company. Mention Rey Mysterio, because Rey Mysterio is the most famous luchador in the world.
Well, do you know what? They did the same thing with Jericho's promo. You know, he came out and he's talking about this ridiculous new match that he's got. And he says, you know, I was the creator of another match with a ladder and a briefcase, the words Money in the Bank, with the way he executed it. And it's one of those things where you kind of go, okay, they're doing enough stuff that WWE do. They're taking ex-WWE guys, but they're still somehow different and unique, and all the indie people who watch the indie shows absolutely adore them.
What I think,
if you look at the view of WWE.
Well, one of the things that for me is quite interesting is a lot of the AEW talent are loved by fans of indie wrestling. Eddie Kingston's somebody who, for me, has went under the radar far too long. I'm a huge fan of his, and I believe that people are busy talking about MJF and he's the future of the business. I think MJF and Eddie Kingston having a chance for MJF with his outrageous promos, but they're not outrageous in unrealistic ways. They're outrageous in the, I can't believe he just said that type of ways, which we will talk about very soon. And then you have Eddie Kingston, who comes out with the kind of things you expect, you know, a Puerto Rican in New York to come out with. And I'm not saying he's Puerto Rican, I'm not saying he's in New York. That kind of thing you expect somebody just a real person to say. Now, if we're talking about being high on Eddie Kingston, let's talk about Karrion Kross. Now, Karrion Kross, we're going to talk about TakeOver briefly very soon. He worked through an injury and came across very well. And apparently WWE are very high on him, not just because he, 7 matches in, he wins the NXT World Championship. I'm sorry, that's a spoiler for TakeOver, but he did. He won the championship. And he got injured and still finished the match, and separated shoulder as well. So during the match, you can see it. You can see the welt showing up. WWE are not going to be abandoning his push, shall we say. I think I'm a big fan of Karrion Kross. I said to you when he debuted. One of the things I think...
Did I not read somewhere? Maybe I'm totally wrong about this. Maybe I'm totally wrong about this, but I thought I read somewhere that he actually gave the title up.
Yeah, well, we'll talk about that later. It's a spoiler. Okay, so one of the things that for me, I really do think we need to talk about, of course, is WWE and their trademarks. So according to PW Insider, WWE is engaged in a trademark battle with FTR over the following trademarks: no flips, just fists, say yeah, top guys, hashtag FTRKO, and Shatter Machine. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? These were all WWE creations, or at least creations whilst they were being paid by WWE. The fact that the Revival would even try to contest these is a joke. They're not going to win. They can't win. For me, WWE are right to protect their intellectual properties. And anybody who argues otherwise doesn't understand how business works. So how do you feel about WWE kind of holding talent up so they can't use their names when they move into different territories?
I certainly think that it's the right of WWE to do so. as far as I'm concerned, if you're on their dime using their money to make yourself a star, it's not just the fact that you're putting yourself out there and kind of, no, it's your talent alone. You're using their cameras, their TV time, their business smarts to be able to give yourself a stage to put yourself out there. If you create a gimmick that is on their time, that belongs to them. If you were to go home that night and talk it over with your wife and say, do you know what, I think this would be good for me going forward. I'll speak to Vince and see what we can do. Depending on where you are on the card, he may say to you, do you know what, I will give you the right to that. Or if it's like a family lineage thing.
Well,
certainly, I think
they've given Brett the right to some of his footage. So they are open to doing that. I certainly don't think FTR are in a position to be able to claim rights to anything. So for me, I personally think that's a very, very crazy one for them to be fighting. Now, talking of crazy, did you hear about what happened to Sonya Deville? So she had a trespasser in her property with a knife and was going to, at the very least, kidnap her. The likelihood is much, much more. She ended up in court, and the next day had to go to SmackDown, and she did SmackDown, and then she was obviously on SummerSlam as well. They massively changed the plans for that. We'll talk about that when we talk about SummerSlam. But there's somebody else that's been a little bit of a problem. So there's the same guy who keeps invading the Performance Center, and his name's Alejandro Montalvo. He was shot outside the WWE Performance Center in 2015. He's been denied bail for trespassing. Now, he's arrested back in June, and then later had another incident at the Performance Center. And he was denied bail because obviously there's quite a lot of security around WWE. But Montalvo was previously out on bail when he was arrested again last June. His June 5th arrest includes the following charges: battery on a law enforcement officer, trespassing on property after warning, resisting an officer with violence outside of a Walmart. He later posted $2,750 bond and then continued to the Performance Center to trespass again, harassing talent. The latest incident was on June 15th, just 10 days after. He was later arrested again on June the 22nd, whilst he was released on bond for again going to the Performance Center. What is it with crazy fans? I mean, I get it. We record a show every week and put it up on YouTube. We're fans. We love wrestling. We love talking about it. But we'd never go to the point of going to somebody's home or going to the Performance Center every week. Maybe going and getting an autograph.
Even when we've been at shows and we know the talent is there to kind of speak to and have that opportunity to do that with, we are still like so incredibly nervous about even approaching them. I believe on the one show, obviously, where we were at SmackDown and we tweeted Adam Pearce to say, hey, you know, can we get an autograph? And he just texted right back, right, well, find me then.
Yeah, which
and
was never hard.
We got permission to stalk him at the very least.
Exactly. And the thing is, as long as you get permission, it's all good. Yeah. Now, so let's move on to... No, sorry, if you have something to say, I'm not going to cut you off.
I certainly think that there is a scary element there where there's such a fine line between being a fan and being interested in the stories and the lore of it all, to then kind of stepping over that line and perhaps even thinking that everything's real. I mean, there may still be people out there.
Still real with me. No, I agree.
If you just look at like that episode of Friends, you know, where the superfan Zoey basically thinks that he is Dr. Drake Ramori and shows up at his house. And then there's that moment where she sees him, but then she also sees Drake on the TV and everything just kind of shatters.
Yeah. I mean, for me,
people out there like that.
I don't get it. I mean, I get nervous around famous people. I mean, when we've seen Johnny Vegas, just casual nod. I met Drew McIntyre in a bar and bought him a beer. I don't go out, I'm not the kind of person that would go out of my way to harass a celebrity. I mean, he was in a bar and he was quite happy to talk, so Drew was fair game. But I don't see the point in harassing celebrities. Certainly, Sonya Deville, she's taken time away from the business because obviously everything has just really put the fear of God into her. And as far as I'm concerned, it was meant to be a hair versus hair match at SummerSlam, and obviously they very quickly made a rewrite and did a loser leaves town match instead. I think the hair versus hair match would have been better. Jim Cornette said in his podcast, The Drive-Thru, she could have basically had her head shaved, as was the original stipulation, and then just disappeared for however long she needs anyway. But
Yeah.
instead, she decided that, that maybe the writers decided, let's write her off TV and then we'll figure everything out later on. Because she isn't leaving the company. They can bring her back.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was about to say. At least then she has the scope to take the time and figure out what she wants to do. I mean, even with, you hear about the fans or the reporters that go to the airports and catch them as they're coming out of the gate. And we know, of course, last year Sasha had bad press because she basically told the fans who'd been waiting for her to get lost. But they were there at like absurd o'clock in the morning and didn't even wait for her to get off the bridge before going straight up and saying, right, can I get X, Y, and Z from you?
Yeah,
and half the time, these punters will be the guys that are getting 10 or 15 autographs at a time, putting them up on eBay at £50 each.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of appreciation for the fact that you are a celebrity. You have to maintain that image and kind of interact with the fans and make sure that they're the ones that have got you where you are. But at the same time,
there has to be a limit.
Yeah, precisely.
I think for me that's a problem when it comes to wrestling, is that everybody thinks that people are fair game, and the reality is, Randy Orton comes across as an asshole because it prevents people coming up to him. CM Punk comes across as an asshole because it prevents people coming up to him. But when you see CM Punk talking and you see how the people who are his friends, how close he gets to them, he can't be that much of an asshole if he has that close of a friendship with certain people. So
I love the Subway story. He's in the Subway and the waitress making his sandwiches goes, "Oh, you're CM Punk, high five," and that's it.
Yeah,
I genuinely love that story.
Compared to the guy who, whilst he's standing having a pee, says, "Can I get an autograph?" and CM Punk has to say to him, "Well, can you hold this for me then?" I mean, it's just.
What was where we were watching the story about Kevin Hart, where he's like the guy comes into the bathroom for a picture and he's in the stall, and the guy basically waits outside the door.
Kevin Hart's not doing a number one; he's doing a number two, and it's a fairly brutal one because I believe it's a burrito place, and he spends like a while because it's an emotional one. And after he's shed his tears and he's had his words with God and he's begged for forgiveness, he goes outside and the guy's standing there like. Hi.
It does. It sounds so absurd. But that said, if you this isn't to justify their actions, but if you were the guy in that situation, what would you do? Would you kind of socially awkward? Obviously, he may have just frozen and literally not known what to do.
But I mean, it's quite common when celebrities are in restaurants, they'll say, "Hey, listen, I'm with my family. Can I finish my food? And then what we'll do is I'll come over to you when I'm finished and take some pictures with you and stuff." And I think most people don't mind that.
Who was it that gave the kid like £200 to get him a bucket of KFC and then he drove away in his car?
That was a footballer who played for Liverpool and I believe Man City, and his name totally escapes me. He went over to Italy. Totally mental. Anyway, but yeah, I mean, there's the Bill Murray story where Bill Murray turns around and basically sits down at somebody's table and joins in and eats their food, and he gets up and says, "Nobody will ever believe you," and just walks away and doesn't pay any of the bill. But conversely, there's stories of Bill Murray picking up bills for like entire restaurants. He's not an asshole. He gave somebody a story that. It doesn't matter if you paid $50 for the food because Bill Murray sat and had a conversation with you, and that's worth $50 as far as I'm concerned. Now, let's talk about so Excalibur. Are you a fan of his commentary when he was on AEW? No, he's been away for a wee while.
Do you know what? This is going to sound bad because I know there are a lot of fans out there, but I liked Excalibur because when he was talking, he wasn't making mistakes. JR was. I love JR.
Yeah,
I love JR. I've got massive respect for him, but he's missing a step. And the fact that Excalibur, although he's no amazing commentary. I think he would be well suited to step into that role and do the play-by-play and let JR move on to color.
Or
You know,
turn JR into the main
overweight.
event guy. Turn JR into the guy that does the main event, or he does the pay-per-views. And he's like Mike Tenay was in WCW. He's the expert, so he's in to do the big stuff. He doesn't need to commentate on. Well, we're going to talk about AEW in a minute, but yeah. So Excalibur is back for this week's episode of AEW, which is live tonight. We're going to preview that after we talk about AEW. So it is quite interesting that Excalibur's back. There were some allegations involving him and use of the N-word. It appears the investigation into that. He did say the N-word. They were in his promos. Apparently that investigation has went nowhere, just like Sammy Guevara saying he wanted to rape Sasha Banks, apparently, in 4 weeks. That's all forgotten about. And then obviously Velveteen Dream, the allegations against him, where all of a sudden they're suddenly forgotten about and he's back on TV because according to Triple H, there's no substance to them. Okay, well, the person who made the allegations has publicly declared WWE have never spoken to him. So how's that an investigation? You need to speak to both sides.
Certainly, I think when you're policing internally, there's no benefit from that. You need an external, like with alcohol, with like licensing boards, we need some kind of like wrestling licensing board or tribunal even to kind of keep things to T.
I certainly think
because it's quite difficult for.
British Wrestling's going to go down that route. British Wrestling has to go down the route of having some form of licensing body that at least, removes people who are unsavory. And when these stories show up of, Travis Banks and several other, Marty Scurll, for example, the stories about him, when these things show up, it needs to be acknowledged and accepted. Now, there are certain stories about Marty Scurll, of him with 16-year-old girls, which in America is illegal. And in the UK is perfectly legal. There you need some context. You need to understand where these things happened. You need to understand, you live by the law of the land that you're in. And Marty Scurll's allegations go deeper than, whether it was an issue between 16 and 18 being the age of consent in a country. Several of these allegations are much deeper than that. I certainly think Excalibur using the N-word 8 or 9 years ago in a promo, and probably more than that, in a promo for a wrestling company, it's not enough to get him sacked. He screwed up. He said something that he probably wouldn't say now because I'm certain we've both said things when we were younger. Knowing the area you grew up in the area I grew up in, we both probably said things we definitely wouldn't say anymore. So, I can see why people are angry.
I think part of the issue, again, not to justify anything, but I think part of the issue is the culture and the people that you're around. Certainly, when I was young, I grew up in a rough kind of neighborhood, and a lot of these types of things were thrown around freely, and you just didn't know that there was anything wrong with it until you kind of left that bubble and somebody went, right, this is why this is wrong.
And I think that's something.
It's not even to say that he said it not thinking that it's wrong. I think it's maybe just a thing where everybody else has said it, so he's not thought anything of it, potentially.
Yeah. Now, obviously, I want to move on very quickly to some other stories. Now, we are both looking for new jobs, and I have the perfect job for both of us. Now, are you ready for this? SmackDown is looking for a new head writer. Now, they just fired Krista Joseph for basically arsing around, and anybody who knows who Krista Joseph is will know why arsing around is even funnier than just because he's arsing around. So yeah, the WWE is looking for a new head writer for SmackDown. Trust me, this isn't a job either of us want. This is it's not a 40-hour per week job. This is something where, as the lead writer, you carry the can when Vince decides to change the script that you've written. It's still the lead writer's fault, even though Vince screws it all up. Now,
I think we're basically in those roles just now anyway with our current bosses.
Well, let's not go too far into that just now. Now, one of the things that intrigues me is that every now and again somebody comes along, obviously they're looking for head writers, but there is people in the WWE who help out and get involved with writing for other people. Now, throughout the years, Bret Hart was obviously one of them, and there's been others throughout the years who've helped countless wrestlers. One person who's been involved in SmackDown Creative is Daniel Bryan, and apparently Vince has been giving him quite a lot of authority when it comes to certain storylines. So The Miz was on a podcast, and he was talking about Friday Night SmackDown, and this is what The Miz had to say about Daniel Bryan. Now, I'm going to give you the quote. I've been doing this the past couple of weeks, giving out full quotes. So this should be the only full quote in the show. He won't be writing for me. I'll tell you that for one thing. There's no denying Daniel Bryan's talent. Do I get along with him? Absolutely not. Will I listen to his writing inquiries? Sure. Will I do them? Probably not. But honestly, Daniel Bryan is a brain. He knows exactly. Look how big he became. It's because of me mostly. But he's a very good talent in WWE. I think if he wants to, I haven't heard that, so I don't know exactly what he's doing. But if he is, he's an immense talent, and he's got a brain for the show, so he will make it better, as much as it hurts me to say that. Now, Miz is saying that as The Miz, not as Mike Mizanin.
That is an incredible compliment.
Yeah. I think Daniel Bryan, obviously, he's been helping out Drew Gulak, who we both like. He's been helping out Grand Metalik and several others and helping to get these littler guys over. I'm a fan of letting the guys who get the business be involved in the writing. Now, I know Punk did it for a while. I know several others have done it. So it's interesting to see that Vince is putting some trust into Daniel Bryan. Now, let's move on, because I want to address one thing before we start talking about AEW, and that is the debut of Keith Lee on Raw this week came with some new ring gear, but more importantly, it came with a music change for him. Now, earlier this year in March, WWE broke ties with CFO, the guys who were writing the music for them, and came up with quite a lot of the best tunes that they do. Now they're working with Def Rebel, the pseudonym of businessman and music producer Doug Davis. However, the changing of the guard in terms of music might not apply to everybody. Certainly, it would change the WWE if everybody's theme songs were to be changed who were written by CFO. Because, and this isn't a definitive list, but Matt Riddle, Tommaso Ciampa, Undisputed Era, Lacey Evans, Ricochet, one of my favorites, Shinsuke Nakamura, both of one of our favorites, Charlotte Flair, Sasha Banks, and the Snoop Dogg remix is produced by CFO as well. Kevin Owens, Alexa Bliss, Bobby Roode, and Drew McIntyre are all CFO tunes. Now, obviously, tunes change over the years, and WWE have changed certain talents' tunes over the years. What's quite interesting for me is Keith Lee's new theme song is kind of bland, it's kind of boring, but I think his call-up was very last minute. I don't think that they decided weeks ago to have him, again, spoiler, lose the title at TakeOver, and then all of a sudden show up on Raw. I think it just, circumstances worked out that they needed somebody to come in, they need some fresh faces, and having just dropped the title, he's somebody that can show up and be a fresh face. He has said that he doesn't think this is permanent. He will get a new theme song very soon, so there will be some changes. Now, this got me thinking about the WWE and their music. Apparently, what happened was they signed a deal with CFO where they got way too much of the royalties from all their music. And with Jim Johnston, he was paid a fee as opposed to royalties. He became a very wealthy man on the back of WWE, but at the same time, WWE were able to do what they wanted with the music. What do you think if because they've changed Chad Gable and Apollo Crews' music in recent weeks as well. That's part of this switch from CFO. What do you think would happen if WWE were required in a month's time to change that list of talent that I mentioned? Matt Riddle, Undisputed Era, Nakamura. These tunes are synonymous with these talents. Bobby Roode got over on the back of Glorious. Drew McIntyre's theme song definitely needs a change, I think. Being a main event guy, I think he needs something with a Scottish influence. But I would love to see a band be able to perform a song for Drew. But I think that's obviously something that will happen as fans come back. Do you like the CFO theme songs, or do you hark back for the Jim Johnston era?
I do like a lot of Jim Johnson's stuff. You don't realise how much that he actually did until you watch that documentary and you see him coming up with these little tidbits that then turn into these massive tunes. Of course, he did the Rocks one, all of those remixes, and Stone Cold as well. I don't know whether the tune makes the wrestler or the wrestler makes the tune. Because with some of the more iconic ones, you recognise them based on the tune.
I mean, Jim
But
Johnson
at the same
spoke
time,
about
their own talent gets them over.
Yeah, Jim Johnson spoke about a process. And what he said was, depended on the wrestler. With some, Ultimate Warrior was very frenetic with his entrance, so it made sense for the theme song to be. And then obviously with others like Stone Cold, you needed a big impact followed by a brooding tune on the way to the ring. And then obviously,
did he not say that he was trying to capture the essence of the character, not like in terms of the person, not even just the gimmick? You wanted a tune that would outlast the gimmick changes.
Yeah, and then now what you have,
very important.
what you have now, unfortunately, WWE are up until March were relying on CFO, who would basically write tunes and then stick them into a bank that would then be selected by various people. And Bray Wyatt was one of the first ones to pick a tune that was so far out there, it was completely different. And the problem is that none of these songs are written specifically for the talent. So hopefully we get back to the days where theme songs are written for talent, because some of them are just so bland. And I'm not a fan of these bland generic. If I was a fan of bland generic entrance theme songs, I'd be watching AEW.
But then it can go the other way, realistically. If you have that small bank of theme songs there where wrestlers can go in and kind of choose something or have something attributed to them, they can then make something of that and bring it higher. I mean, just look at Fandango. He's a mid-card guy that kind of he coasted. Let's face it, he coasted through his career in WWE.
Yeah,
but his theme song was in the top 10 iTunes list
and
because of the.
What's quite interesting is I think Fandango as Johnny Curtis was never going anywhere. He needed that gimmick change. And the WWE music has always been a huge part of it for me. When Shawn Michaels won the world title for the first time and his music's playing, it was a wonderful image to see. And that song that you'd heard for so long that was so naff, it was so cheesy, and now it became the song of the world champion. And it took on a different meaning. Vader's theme song. When you hear Vader's theme song, shit's going down. When you heard Yokozuna, that's for me what wrestling should be. Whereas sometimes, now we know Kevin Owens' theme song, but 30 seconds into Kevin Owens' theme song, you're waiting for somebody to start singing. You're waiting for something to happen.
That said, Samoa Joe's theme song haunted my dreams for 6 months.
Samoa Joe's theme song was one that he absolutely hated. He was at an indie show, and when he was signed to NXT but allowed to work indie shows, and somebody said, what the hell's going on with that theme in NXT? And Joe just looked at him and went, I know, it sucks, it's horrible. He may have said some other words, but he just it's horrible. But see, now, I think he would be at the point now where he would say, it's not horrible. If people dislike the song, they're really going to dislike when I punch their favorite wrestler in the face. So I think now he realizes he doesn't need a flashy tune. It's so simple. He's like Godzilla coming to destroy little NXT at the time. For me, that was perfect.
That brings it back. That brings it back to exactly what I was saying before. The fact that he has got a more generic tune means that he can turn that character. He can help it progress his character, and it helps him in that sense. It's not made for him, but he can make it his own.
Well, we are going to have to agree to disagree on certain things when it comes to theme songs. So I know we have different choices of our favorite theme songs. But let's try and come to an agreement on a song between us that we think is the best modern one. I think the most impactful modern theme song would be Shinsuke Nakamura. I think the way that the audience respond to that song is incredible, particularly when we've seen Nakamura live. Nakamura is an incredible performer, but that theme song, when you're looking around the building and the amount of people you see going, when it's played. For me, the Nakamura theme song would be the iconic modern wrestling theme. What would yours be?
To be clear, we're talking about the original Rising Sun theme song that I had as my ringtone for a year, not that
Not the punk
one
band
where they
version.
added the extra instrument. Yeah, I think I agree. It's either that or Glorious.
Okay, yeah, Glorious
But
is good, but I think
the
Nakamura
Rising,
captures like when you know that you're getting a performer who's willing to embrace every aspect of himself, and I think we know
I
what we're talking
feel
about there.
I feel that that theme it's like a beautiful marriage between classical music and the kind of edgier punk, and that's what I love about. I think the term for it is J-pop, where the Japanese music it takes elements from all these different sources and it puts it together and harmonizes it. So even if you don't speak the language, you can still get lost in that music. You can still kind of find yourself ridiculously singing along, even if you're probably butchering the pronunciation of
And isn't
things.
that part of the fun? Now,
But
I do think though that whatever the next step is for WWE, I certainly think they're not going to launch 20 new theme songs right now. I think they're going to wait, and we're maybe going to see almost like a reset when the fans are back. We may see new theme songs for people coming all the time.
what they
So
could do is they could get, what is it called again? Is it Retribution? I can never remember the name of those guys. They can basically have an angle where they steal the hard
the
drive or
infamous hard
whatever it
drive,
is this music is on,
it becomes like Mission
and then
Impossible.
they'll
Din, din,
yeah,
din, din, din.
they'll just have to, reboot from scratch, give everybody a temporary theme song, and then all of a sudden, 6 weeks later, it's no longer temporary.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to add somebody into the chat now because what we've been doing the past few weeks is we've been getting Gordon Stephen to go and have a look. Hello, Gordy. How are you doing?
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Hi.
So the past few weeks, we've been getting you to have a little nosy at some wrestling-related content. And Retribution this week has changed. They've added two big dudes, and they're clearly different to the guys that were involved in everything else. But they're the absolute shits when it comes to wrestling. So we're going to be interested to see where that gimmick goes. On SummerSlam, you had Roman Reigns talking about Retribution. So perhaps a little tease, or maybe an Alfred Hitchcock false tease, leading you down that false path to potentially think that Roman Reigns is going to be the leader when they're not. Certainly seems too early for them to suggest that Roman Reigns is the leader. He has his own retribution. He just used the same word. Although, interestingly, for the guys and girls who haven't seen SummerSlam, Kevin Owens mentioned that he was going to get retribution and then immediately corrected himself and said he didn't mean to say that word, which means they were clearly told not to say the word retribution unless they were talking about retribution. Anyway, so
The only thing I know about Roman Reigns this past week is just fake teeth.
Fake teeth, indeed. We're going to talk about the fake teeth. Oh, man, those fake teeth, they're just incredible. I don't even think they're fake. I think he just spent a lot of money getting them done during COVID. But so the past few weeks, let's try and remember what we've given you. So we gave you retribution, and you kind of are intrigued to see where it goes, but obviously at the minute there's not a lot there.
I didn't like the Retribution stuff. It was the underground stuff I actually did care for.
Okay, so underground is all pre-tape stuff as well. So apparently they cut one of the matches this week, but they are at least heading somewhere with it, which I'm not entirely sure. I mean, the Hurt Business took over in the first week, so I think that hasn't been continued, although they do keep showing up. But I've been intrigued for a few weeks. I wanted to build up. I know Sammy's the one who's been watching AEW, and I wanted to get you involved in looking at some content from AEW. And we're not going to tear it apart here because I don't think that's the best way to do it. But we got you to watch this week's MJF promo, so you get to see what he's like, and then one of the older MJF promos, so we can kind of get your opinion of what you think about MJF, and then we'll get Zoey Styles' opinion of MJF as well, and see what we think. So, what is your opinion?
Want me to start?
Yeah, what's your opinion of MJF?
Why the Barbary?
Do you know what? I think the Burberry is very strange. I'm not a fan of Burberry. I never have been.
That's the only thing I got away from that video. Is like, why is he wearing Burberry?
See, that I think it's designed to annoy people because Burberry. I mean, in the UK, it's associated obviously with chaps, Neds, yeah. In America, I think it's still considered quite a posh brand. What do you think? I mean, one of the lines that MJF said, Zoey Styles, do you want to come in and say the line that you messaged me when you found that MJF promo from me earlier?
I can't remember it word for word, but it's something along the lines of, yeah, for you fans still living in your mother's basement, just so you know, she swallows.
I love that line.
Here's a guy who's just out there to try and get heat. Now, my favorite NXT guy, my favorite AEW guy is Eddie Kingston. But when it comes to long term, I think MJF, in 5 or 6 years' time, he's either going to be main event in WrestleMania because he realizes AEW is not the future, or he's going to be in films. When somebody realizes how brave this guy is, he's going to have a future. And I certainly think that...
Do you think he'll be in Marine 10?
What was that?
Do you think he'll be in Marine 10?
Oh, God, I hope WWE films have ended by then. Oh, but do you know what? If you keep bringing up WWE films, I'm going to go and make you watch like a Scooby-Doo at WrestleMania or something. That'll be your homework for next week unless you stop.
Well, hey, do you know what? I actually really enjoyed Mr. Nanny, so I wouldn't mind. I'm pretty sure we do actually have...
You are probably the only one.
No, that's the weird thing, though. It had so many elements from other movies that I've seen or that are actually far superior, but Mr. Nanny came first. So it's quite clear that it's influenced a generation of movies that have to come, even if it itself didn't hold up.
So
and let's face it, we love seeing Hulk Hogan in like tutus and pools of blood.
I went to the cinema.
Sorry, which one was it that he starred with Christopher Lloyd? I forget which movie that one is.
That would be Suburban Commando.
I was about to say Suburban Commando.
Yes. That was a film, I watched that film about 100 times, and I never twigged that Christopher Lloyd was the Doc from Back to the Future. It took me so long, and then I hit about 15 or 16 and went, oh, that's the Doc. But it's one of those. Hulk Hogan was even in a Muppets film. Hulk Hogan was in Thunder in Paradise.
He was in Gremlins?
Yeah, he wanted to be an actor. And I think when you look, I think he'd be supremely angry when you look at how successful The Rock has been. But I think very quickly, MJF keeps reminding me of The Rock. He says things that are brave. He's coming up with catchphrases. The one thing I don't really like is the fact that his political speech style promo is something that EC3 did at the last election. So I don't think what he's doing is original. I think his delivery is original. So, Gordy, whilst you're here, I know you dislike the name Gordy, so I apologize, but Zoey versus Gordy is a feature that I plan on doing in the coming weeks a little bit more often. So let's find out your opinion, Gordy. What do you think of MJF?
I like he's a good heel. I like him.
Yeah. You haven't seen him wrestle because we just sent promos. But
just based entirely on promos. He is a guy you can hate.
Great. Now, Zoey, what do you think of MJF? You've also seen him wrestle, so you have that little bit of an advantage. What do you think of MJF?
I think he does have a lot of potential. The fact that he can deliver these promos, and they're not just like short tidbits where he's been given lines here and there. He can speak for the full 10-15 minutes. And the thing that I really enjoyed, I know you guys haven't actually seen this clip, but on AEW last week, he's in the middle of cutting a promo and he notices his assistant to the left of him has lost her smile. And he basically stops mid-promo to turn to her and insist that she starts smiling again, and there's this little hint that he's gonna slit her throat open before he goes perfectly calm again, straight back into what exactly he was saying, hashtag not my champion, which I agree with, because Moxley is a terrible champion at the moment.
And you are a Moxley fan, but I just want to say something interesting.
T-shirt.
Yeah. Gordy, I suggest you go out of your way. I'll maybe send you the clip so you can watch it. A few years ago at an NXT pay-per-view, he actually was one of the security guards that guided Samoa Joe down to the ring, and he tried to walk in front of Samoa Joe, and I believe it was in character. So Joe basically just moved him out of the way by pushing him into the wall. And you can see him, MJF, look at him and react like, oh okay.
That's interesting to know. Do you know why?
Because they replicated that segment on AEW that week. So when somebody found MJF was in that segment, MJF had security guards kind of walk him down towards the entranceway to get to the ring as well. And as he was doing it, he ended up pushing one of the people that was in front of him, almost like a nod to what happened in WWE. One of the things I dislike about AEW is that they almost kind of bring up WWE too much and poke fun at it.
Oh.
Unfortunately, we'll get there after Gordy leaves. We will get there. We will insult AEW. Don't worry. I've been looking forward to this all day. But one of the things that I do like is when certain individuals can almost poke fun at themselves. MJF was clearly poking fun at himself with that. So although he has this serious gimmick and he nearly slit somebody's throat, at least symbolically, he almost has this side of him where you can see that he's willing to show his ass. It's a wrestling term. He was willing to show his ass and embarrass himself. So everybody that didn't know about the Samoa Joe segment, just that's a character development for MJF. Everybody that knew about it had a wee chuckle, but also saw he now sees himself as Samoa Joe. So it's still character. And that's something I think AEW has been massively missing. Now, coming up next week, Gordy, we are going to get you to watch something else. So are you up for watching something a little bit longer than just a short promo?
Probably.
Okay.
As long as it's not Mr. Nani.
Okay, it won't be Mr. Nani, and I can assure you it will not be like a 3-hour Raw, because nobody wants to watch it. Yeah, nobody wants to watch a 3-hour Raw.
Married to him to suffer through that.
Well, this weekend...
You have to be married to him to suffer through that.
Yeah, so this week she watched 3 hours of Raw. She spent half the night up with, I believe it was NXT TakeOver on. There was also SummerSlam. There was 2 documentaries, and there was several other things, including matches that were on as well. So wrestling is something that obviously she has to watch quite a lot of. So I'm figuring...
I missed the 2010s when I actually had time to actually just watch this.
This is, of course, putting aside all the extra documentaries you put on, plus the classic stuff from the 90s.
Yeah.
That I hear in my sleep. That is the reason why I like Samoa Joe's theme song. Because I was sat when you were playing 2K and Samoa Joe's theme is one of the ones that are in the menu options. I was sat on with the Wii U playing Golden Sun, and every 10 minutes or so I'm hearing Samoa Joe's theme song, which is why it ended up in my dreams.
So
every single time since, I heard it every time I played Golden Sun.
Okay, so next week we're going to give Gordy something a little bit longer. Now, me and Zoe are going to come up with something that's longer than a 3-minute promo or 3-minute promo highlight video, but shorter than a 3-hour Raw. So somewhere in between there. That's kind of what you're going to get. So next week, expect to be putting aside a little bit more time, but definitely not going to give you a 3-hour Raw. But thank you for joining us, and we will hopefully catch you next week.
More than likely. See ya.
See ya.
Bye, peeps.
Okay, so one of the things that's quite interesting for me is let's talk about AEW. You were the one who watched it this week, so let's talk about AEW, and we will get the info for what's happening on tonight's AEW as we're recording this. But obviously, by the time the show goes out, it will have already happened. So AEW from Saturday, which was the first day change. Overall, before we start, let's get your opinion. What did you think of the show before we get into a little deep dive with it?
Do you know what? Considering they have All Out coming up, I think it was a decent show. There wasn't as much wrestling as I would have hoped in it, but you have to consider the fact that they're needing to set up these character stories for the pay-per-view, which I'm happy they took the time to actually stop and do.
Okay, so let's look at what happened in the show. Obviously, we've mentioned one guy already, which is Kofi Kingston, or not Kofi Kingston, Eddie Kingston. What was your opinion of Eddie Kingston's promo on the show?
I really enjoyed it. I thought that it was a refreshing change. I actually kind of thought about, right when the Good Brothers were on their losing streak, and then AJ basically calls them out and says, "Now, like, you guys are a bunch of losers. What happened?"
Yeah.
There's a similar feel here where he addresses them all individually, and instead of talking to them as tag teams, he splits them up and basically says, "You know what, like, after Tully's promo last week, where it's clear those who have the gold are the only ones worth watching."
Which as Tully is a former champion, and he saw the gold as being all important. Particularly, his father would have promoted the fact the champion's the go-to guy. So, I mean, I love Eddie Kingston. I think to have him at least trying to kind of kickstart something in that tag division, which for me, even though they have some great tag teams, it's just plodding along, and it's being led by Kenny Omega and Hangman Page, who are two singles wrestlers essentially being put together to further their storyline at the detriment of the tag division.
Well, they're not a real tag team. I mean, they quite clearly are very talented, and they get that chemistry in there. But there are way too many opportunities in several of their tag matches, especially Miller in that fall, or Page suddenly out of nowhere just catching it. And like I said on last week's show, it makes you think that it'll just take that one time for a real tag team to come in and separate them, and then they'll lose and they're done.
I mean, for me, I'm a big fan of tag team wrestling. So the Private Party versus FTR match, I'm a big fan of FTR. Private Party, they are going to be big. I mean, they're both talented. The match was just confusing from what I've seen. Just too much happening when the FTR style should have slowed it down and tried to show that the Private Party could wrestle, and it was almost like they were trying to fit in everybody's stuff. What was your opinion of the tag match?
I agree. I think that FTR had the opportunity to go with their fists not flips gimmick, because it's a common criticism that we've had that I carry on into this week, that a lot of the wrestling is a bunch of high spots with some counters mixed in there, and there's no real chemistry or like sequence to the wrestling. You're just seeing all these pop moments that kind of get you a little bit high, but then you start going, okay, that's the end of the match. Why did they win?
Well,
there are
for
a select few matches on each show, oddly enough, with the Dark Order, mostly, who I don't even rate that highly. Who I think, do you know what? I don't rate them that highly, but they do their moves together. And the only thing that really, for me, got FTR over in that match was the final finish where they double teamed and then pinned them.
Well, for me, the problem with AEW's tag division is somebody's a heel one week and then a babyface the next. And it's almost like they kind of decide who the babyface and heel is beforehand by going, rock, paper, scissors. Oh, okay, you're the heel this week. And that's, for me, a negative. FTR's heels, I'm behind that. But in 2 weeks' time, they'll be in against somebody else where they need to play the babyface because that works for that week. But it doesn't work for long-term storytelling. Now, let's move on. Jurassic Express.
I'd be quite interested to see.
What was that?
I'd be quite interested to see. I'm saying I'd be quite interested to see a tag team where there's one face and one heel, but that the friendship transcends that kind of evil divides, should we say.
I think every now and again something like that could work, but I think AEW, if it worked once, then you would see it all the time. So let's move quickly to a match that, when we were talking about the show earlier, you used a word to describe Jurassic Express and Natural Nightmares versus Butcher Blade and Lucha Brothers. What was the word that you used, if you can think back to the conversation? Because you weren't happy with this match.
I really wasn't. I can't remember the specific word off the top of my head, so I'm hoping you have it handy.
Well, it translates to clusterfuck. It translates to clusterfuck. So.
Yeah, I just felt there was far too much going on here. Again, you've got the traditional 8-man match where there's only 2 people in the ring at once, and then everything's very kind of sprawled out. But the only person who actually did some real wrestling in that match was Dustin. Don't get me wrong, the guy that he's got with him is very talented, and he took a hell of a beating off of the Butcher and Blade. But then he kind of disappeared into nothing. And while Dustin is doing a very good job, of propping him up and making him look like a star, there's no follow through there.
I mean, for me, anytime you have an 8-man match, people have to get lost, because unless you give that an hour, people aren't going to get their stuff in. So the people who want to look good aren't going to make it look good. Now, let's move on. Orange Cassidy and Best Friends joined Tony Schiavone. Chris Jericho interrupted and announced the Mimosa Mayhem match at All Out. The only way to win is to throw your opponent into an 80-gallon vat of orange juice and champagne. Yeah, so what's your opinion of the Mimosa Mayhem match?
Well, you can also win by submission or pinfall, which is a kind of relief, so you're not spent the entire time hoping somebody gets thrown in. But I don't see the appeal of it. I don't understand how you would be hoping somebody gets thrown into a giant mimosa.
For me, the problem here is it seems like a 50-year-old guy trying to look like he's up to date. And it doesn't come across well. I'm also not a fan of Orange Cassidy. I remember showing you a video of his before he joined AEW, and your instant reaction was, well, what's the point? Why has he got his hands in his pockets? Okay, it's funny the first time, but then where do you go from there? I don't get the gimmick.
I mean, that was part of my problem. That was part of my problem with Jericho's promo this week, where he basically made a point of saying, "I've only lost 3 times, and once was to a guy with hands in his pocket," and he's talking about it as though it's something that he can be proud of. Not that he's lost, but he's trying to put some lift under Orange Cassidy.
And that is what he's trying to do.
Yeah, but all that comes across to the fan is written that a guy with his hands in his pockets kicked your ass.
Beat a legend. And all this because a 50-year-old guy wants to look like he's hip. This, of course, obviously is the guy who performed a concert with no social distancing and no masks, but that's a different story for a different day. The Elite versus the Dork Order. And yes, I called them the Dork Order. There's some talent in the Dark Order. There is some talent in there. The problem is that the Elite, the Young Bucks, and Kenny Omega, it makes no sense for the tag champ to not be wrestling with his tag partner. Why is he joining with the Young Bucks and doing this feud with the Dark Order? Now, one of the reasons, obviously, after the match, Kenny Omega kind of flipped out and started attacking somebody from the Dark Order. But for no reason. I mean, I think the suggestion is that Kenny Omega's kind of losing his mind. So Kenny Omega's losing his mind, and his tag partner's an alcoholic. It's hard. I mean, I'm sorry, but they had a segment where Hangman Page came in to interrupt a promo, and he has a red cup in his hand, and he's still drinking. I mean, it becomes kind of comical if he's drinking all the time. If you're trying to say that he has a drinking problem, which, by the way, they're making it into something that's funny. So they're turning alcoholism into a joke, which I will never agree with. And and I've already sworn once, but I'm going to swear again because I think it's important. It's a fucked up thing to do for anybody to turn alcoholism into a storyline that's ha-ha and for giggles. Now, Darby Allin versus Will Hobbs, which by all accounts was a workable match. Will Hobbs made himself look decent, but it did lead to Darby Allin having somebody come out afterwards, which was Ricky Starks dressed as Ricky Allin.
That was funny.
Well, see, this is the thing. I kind of agree with something Jim Cornette said. If this was the only goofy thing that happened on the show, you'd be laughing at it, and it is funny, and it's entertaining. And Darby Allin...
It was Taz that got that angle over, because at the end of the match, Taz basically stands up. We're reminded that Taz is on commentary. And he basically calls out Darby Allin. He's like, right, okay, so I've got Ricky Starks. I've got Brian Cage. But guess who I've got? I've got another guy on my team. He's also named Darby. And then I think there was some sort of technical delay because it took him 3 attempts to actually call Darby out, for Darby to come out. And here's Ricky Starks' full face paint skateboard like this. And he does make a very good point in the promo, which is he calls Darby Allin out for the thumbtack incident last week that I was really angry with. Yeah. And I agree with that. The fact that he would press the skateboard onto the thumbtacks of a wrestler who's meant to be performing the next day is bang out of order. But it was just Taz's delivery is what made that promo great, because Darby Allin
is a great promo guy. I mean, orange is Taz's color, but I'm a big fan of Taz on the mic. I think he was wasted in WWE, so to see him getting a chance to go out there and kind of enjoy himself and perform is kind of cool. I like the stuff he's involved with. Obviously, Brian Cage has suffered the same way Lex Luger did in '93. Heading into SummerSlam '93, Lex Luger was trying to get the belt off Yokozuna, and by not winning, Lex Luger looked like a pile of shit, basically. So that's kind of what happened to Brian Cage. They put him over so well, they gave him the FTW belt, and then what's he done since? Absolutely nothing. But let's move on to the thing that really kind of has wound quite a few people up. But I think this pisses me off most, because the Nightmare Sisters versus Diamante and Ivelisse. Now, this is the Women's Tag Team Cup that's been the YouTube exclusive. Did they do a package before this to show the matches and show who'd been participating and stuff?
They did a small one. There were some shorts of the matches that the competitors were actually specifically involved in. So they didn't do a whole scope of the cup.
Okay, so for me, I don't know how you feel about this, right? Let's before I give my opinion, let's find out what you think of the match. Nightmare Sisters versus Diamante and Ivelisse. What was your opinion?
For the fact that we haven't seen Brody wrestle very much at all in the promotion, it was surprising to see that Randy, of course. Who did I say? Brody.
Yeah, there's a Brody coming later.
That's exactly my point, though. I didn't even get her name correct because of how little I've actually seen her in the ring. The last thing I can remember that she was specifically involved with was when Karma was coming down and cutting hair off of people for no good reason.
Which was a stupid angle to start with. But for me...
Yeah, and
so you weren't offended by the match? You weren't offended by the match?
No.
It didn't hurt your feelings. This is what I'm trying to get.
I certainly think the angle where Dustin sat outside with the 2 dolls basically making them make out with each other was a bit
weird.
Elephant in the room-esque.
Yeah, it's the guy who used to be Goldust.
It was a little bit funny. I mean,
it's the guy who used to be Goldust, and it promotes the action figures. I mean, it's funny in a way. For me, the thing that bugs me about this is because Diamante and Ivelisse have not been massively featured on TV, because the Nightmare Sisters, I mean, the fans genuinely dislike Brandy Rhodes in the ring. That seems apparent. And there's something that happens later on, which I'm going to come back to this point as well. The fact that they book a tournament where one of the vice president's wives manages to get to the finals is a joke. There's countless performers that should be in that spot, and instead she's in that spot. this is not to say that she's awful, but she's not very good. She is not somebody that when the fans were there, they wanted to see. They had this entire angle planned with her and Karma, Awesome Kong, and they ended up basically saying she had a bump to the head and it affected her personality. The reason they did that was because they wanted to reset it and get away from it because it was stupid. Just like the heels gimmick that she's been running, where she actually has a show specifically for girls. It's not great content. But anybody that says it's not great content is accused of being sexist. The problem is Brandy should, if she's the chief branding officer, should not be putting herself in a position where she's taking opportunities away from other people. Because even if she's the best wrestler in the world, and she isn't, she's going to get heat. Nobody's going to say it because it might cost them their job, but she's going to get heat. Brandy was not the best person to be in that spot to put these two girls over to make them look strong winning that cup. And I think the fact that she's still getting pushed, even though there's all this bells and whistles that were put in, QT Marshall attempted a distraction, Dustin Rhodes was at ringside. The fact that they didn't win, I think, has been done with the knowledge the fans just wouldn't take to it. And that's part of the problem with AEW for me, because they haven't done that with the Dark Order. And that brings us quite swimmingly to the main event, which I told you earlier I had an opinion on, but let's talk about the American Nightmare Cody Rhodes with Uncle Arn versus the Exalted One Brody Lee. What did you think of this? Because it's a very different match to what you're used to from Cody Rhodes.
I'm kind of torn with this one because while Brody Lee looked very good, Cody looked like a pile of crap. And not because he is a pile of crap, but because he should have been and has kicked out of in previous matches, in previous situations where he's come back, he's sprung up, he's got the crossroads and end of match. Where in this one, the lead up to the end really annoyed me because he basically lay there. He took 3 moves in a row off of Brody Lee and just lay there. Now, had that been one move that was Brody Lee's finisher, he's just been thrown back into the ring after taking a bump off the barricade, and then Brody gets his finisher in and Cody lays there. That would be absolutely fine. That's what Drew did to Orton on the Raw segment, where Orton got that RKO and Drew just didn't move, which is why it makes Shawn look like...
Yeah, we won't talk about Shawn Michaels because of how much that angers both of us. But one of the things that's quite interesting here... Okay, sorry.
But Brody Lee does not look good getting the title, spoiler alert, off a man who does not fight back. It cannot benefit him unless he had his Dark Order cronies out to help him assist that win. The fact that he got it clean made Cody look like a pile of shit, especially when he can't challenge for the main belt. And that's another thing that's going to really just enrage me, so carry on.
Okay, so this is what kind of bugs me about this, right? Now, we did miss 2 things in the show, and we'll talk about them after we talk about this main event. Cody Rhodes has been having 20-minute matches. He's been getting stretched to the limit by, guys that are accepting his open challenge. Some of them are great, some of them are not. But it means that you've had mid-carders and low-level guys that have been dragging him to, his absolute limits. And then Brody Lee comes along and destroys him. He doesn't look like a strong champion, no matter how they portray this. And one of the things that kind of intrigued me, now, Brian Last, who is the producer for Jim Cornette's show, he made an interesting point that kind of, it got me thinking, right? So one of the interesting parts at the end, obviously, Uno and Grayson produced Dustin Rhodes and QT Marshall, who'd been beat up. Brandy then rushed out to check her husband, and Anna Jay from the Dark Order attacked her. One of the things that's quite interesting here is Brian Last suggested that because the fans were so openly against Brandy Rhodes whilst being so for Cody, the fans could have potentially cheered the Dark Order when they attacked Brandy Rhodes, which would have completely messed up their planning. So this match happening in front of no crowd has actually helped them do the exact thing that they wanted to do. The problem here is that you have how many chair shots did Cody Rhodes take?
I can't remember.
It wasn't 100 though, right? There was a couple.
No, there was a few, but this is what I'm saying. Cody looked bad because Brody dominated him. And as you say, he has been going 10, 15-minute matches where he makes the other person look so good. He didn't make Brody Lee look good. Brody Lee killed him.
Yeah, and if you beat a pile of shit, if you beat a pile of shit, that doesn't improve your stock in the world. Now, obviously, Brody Lee would destroy the TNT Championship. So, you know, I'm not a fan of the belt. So, yay! Hopefully, we get rid of that belt and they realize how stupid it is. But
whether you're a fan of the belt or not, the fact that they would do that is so disrespectful to the lineage.
Yeah, and they properly destroyed it. I mean, it was completely messed up, which is, I mean, for a person who doesn't like the belt.
You just know it was the real thing as well.
Yeah. Now,
because it was a half-inch product, you wouldn't have thought anything of it. And that really it annoys me. Yeah,
so we did miss two things on the show, because obviously we ended with something that we're negative on. I kind of wanted to change it and end with a couple of positives. The Sammy Guevara bit, where Sammy Guevara came out and he has the picture-in-picture stuff where he has like words on paper and it's clear Matt Hardy's tampered with them. It's funny. I like that stuff. And then obviously Matt Hardy attacked him. I do think that the Sammy Guevara as a comedy character on his own out with the inner circle, that'll work. That has legs. Working with Matt Hardy will only help him.
Do you know what? They could have produced that bit a lot better. I had the live stream, not the. I had the produced part, not the actual ad break section. And what I saw was basically he came out with a sign, then all of a sudden he's getting hit with a steel chair. There was no in between, and it felt just a bit jarred. They could have timed that much better so that we saw Hardy attack him and basically dispose of the signs.
But then again, the person who is the showrunner there is a person who also is at the Fulham Games. He's also running a sports statistics company. He's also doing various other things. And for some reason, running a wrestling show. Perhaps those errors will get better. But, you know...
But we've been saying that for a year.
Yeah, they've been on air for how long? And the production errors are still there. And they have some great production staff there. So these errors are things they can get rid of because these production staff have worked elsewhere and not had them. Now, this
Perhaps
is the part...
they just don't have the freedom to.
Yeah, well, this is something that I want to end on something positive for AEW for the Saturday show because obviously they were preempted by the NBA, so they moved from Wednesday to Saturday. The thing that excited me the most was the NWA Women's Champion Thunder Rosa showing up and saying that she's going to challenge Hikaru Shida. That's a big deal. I mean, I'm a big fan of Thunder Rosa. I think when it came to the women on the NWA show, she certainly was the most believable. I know her character is not a believable character, but she was certainly the best in ring. So I think that will at least be a good challenge for Hikaru Shida. But what that does tell me as well, I want to end on a positive note, but what that does tell me is that Thunder Rosa coming in is taking a spot from somebody else. Just like Brandy Rose is, they already don't have consistency in the division. So bringing Thunder Rosa in, whilst I'm excited by that, and that's going to be a great match when it happens, clearly I think it's intended for the pay-per-view. It's going to be a great match, but it does take a spot away from somebody else. And WWE have been slaughtered over the years for bringing people in who aren't on the roster and taking spots away. So I wonder how the AEW fans are going to take that. How do you take that, looking at that?
I think that there's not really a women's division with AEW. While they have a champion, their previous champions are still, they've kind of been put to the wayside. You know, we had the Britt Baker promo this week where she says that she's going to go get Nyla Rose, but she needs some help, and that's why she's recruiting her cronies. And of course, she's a dentist, she knows all about this. But we don't see Nyla Rose. We don't see any kind of cohesion there. It seems as though it's just a revolving door of talents that are used once and then disposed of until they're useful again.
And
that does not help build a division or a company.
Yeah, you don't get people over by doing that. So let's talk about this week's show, which, as we're talking, has, I believe, already started. So the show, Britt Baker, Reba, and Penelope Ford versus Big Swole, 3-on-1 handicap match. Tag team gauntlet match, Best Friends, FTR, Young Bucks, and the Natural Nightmares. Winners get the AWA Tag Team Championship match at All Out. I think FTR will get that one. I think they should anyway. Chris Jericho returns on commentary. Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara in a tables match, which is Matt Hardy's wheelhouse. And AEW World Champion Jon Moxley versus MJF contract signing. And we get an update on Cody's condition, and AEW TNT champion Brody Lee celebrates his title win. So what having heard the preview, are you excited by that?
I don't think there's a main event there.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, I think looking at it, for me, I think probably the tag team gauntlet match would be the best option. But Matt Hardy versus Sammy Guevara, possibly if that table match is well planned out, could be something worth seeing. Now, whilst we have you, because you didn't watch all the wrestling, let's kind of shoot through things in a little bit of order. We'll go through SmackDown, because SmackDown was the last WWE show before we had SummerSlam. Now, I know we had NXT on Saturday, but NXT's a different universe to the WWE at the minute. So what we had was Big E defeating Sheamus, and this I did download it. I'm kind of out of the fact that we download it. I'm sure we'll be fine. WWE won't sue us. Having seen the Thunderdome, what do you think of the Thunderdome? Before we fully digest the show.
I think they made very good use of it. It was refreshing to see that the pyro's back and that people can kind of get their entrances in, and it makes you feel a little bit more hyped for what's coming up because they aren't just kind of coming out with the music. You know, there's a little bit of celebration there.
And I think that's been sorely lacking as well.
At the same time, I think they just went too far the other way, though.
Yeah, I think
you had some entrances that are just far too grandstanding for no good reason.
Certainly on a TV show. But the show opened with Bray Wyatt and Vince McMahon, who... It was weird because when Braun Strowman came down to interrupt Bray Wyatt, the Fiend, you saw Vince McMahon was nowhere to be seen. This led to Retribution attacking, and the Fiend disappeared, obviously to further the actions that were going to take place on SummerSlam. I think what we saw there, Retribution with the attack, the WWE locker room came out and cleared everybody away. Everybody stayed at ringside to kind of protect Big E and Sheamus so they could have their match. I don't know where the Retribution angle is going, but some of the people that were on SmackDown are not the same as the ones who were on Raw. There was two big guys on Raw. We'll talk about them in a minute. Shinsuke Nakamura and Cesaro defeated Lucha House Party for the SmackDown Tag Championships. Now, they were already champions, but they retained it. Sasha Banks defeated Naomi. Naomi defeated Bayley in the Beat the Clock Challenge. There is Jeff Hardy defeating AJ Styles for the Intercontinental Championship. They did a leg injury spot for Jeff Hardy, and Jeff did quite a good job of selling. For me, this was a great match for showing. Everybody thinks Matt Hardy's the worker and Jeff Hardy's the spot guy, but I think Jeff's a very underrated worker. When we've seen him live, and the way he connected with the crowd, he actually sold. He brought people into the match. For anybody who hasn't seen AJ Styles and Jeff Hardy from SmackDown, go out your way because it is a great match. And that was obviously the main event heading into the SummerSlam pay-per-view. Obviously, we're not going to talk massively about every single segment that happens on these shows. But this is the part where I'm not going to talk about most of what happened on TakeOver. Damian Priest won the North American Championship. We also saw Karrion Kross win the World Belt against Keith Lee, which obviously allowed Keith Lee to move on to Raw. Karrion Kross finished the match with a separated shoulder, and we will find out in NXT on Wednesday just past, what happens with that, which obviously I'll tell you about in just a second. But when we head to Raw, it opened with Drew McIntyre coming out, cutting a promo. We get to see some fireworks and stuff. And it led to a Randy Orton attack. But what was quite interesting for me about Raw was it was almost like they had more that they could use in the Thunderdome. So we didn't see quite as much pyro on SmackDown. So there was a lot more, certainly for Drew, there was a lot of pyro. But as far as I could see on Raw, opening with Drew was a very good call. But we did see some great matches on Raw. We saw Shayna Baszler defeat Bayley by disqualification. Akira Tozawa reclaimed the 24/7 title in a fatal four-way match. Montez Ford defeated Angel Garza. Now, when we watched this, I remember saying to you, Montez Ford's going to be a star. Just the way he looked in this match, his drop kicks were impressive. His selling was impressive. The way he celebrated his victory, he just looks like somebody who's so comfortable in that ring, and that can only be a good thing. The Riot Squad and Bianca Belair defeated the Iconics and Zelina Vega. Apollo Crews defeated Bobby Lashley in an arm wrestling competition. What was quite interesting here, they did the usual spot. Mark Henry was trying to officiate it. Bobby Lashley kept pulling away to kind of break Apollo Crews' concentration. But there is this old idea that if you put your foot underneath the table first, you have the grip and it's easier to win. So Bobby Lashley tried to do that, knowing that he would win. So Apollo Crews put his foot on top of Bobby Lashley and then quickly got the win. So Apollo Crews beat Bobby Lashley in an arm wrestling contest, which was quite impressive. And that led, obviously, to Bobby Lashley heading into Raw Underground, dominating Dolph Ziggler, Cedric Alexander. And then the Viking Raiders came in and there was an all-out brawl erupted there. So they're trying to make Bobby Lashley look like the bad heel, but also then allowing him to look brutal as well, which is kind of impressive. We did see Randy Orton defeat Keith Lee by disqualification, Drew McIntyre with the run-in there. What did you think of Keith Lee's debut? Because I know you've seen bits and bobs of him in NXT, but how do you think he looked in WWE? He came out, obviously, for the promo with Randy and then had a match with Randy later on. How do you think he looked?
The way he looks and the way he talks are like completely out of sync. I think what you were saying about theme songs earlier, the fact that he has quite a little bit of a duller theme song works well with the way he speaks.
Yeah.
If that was his like whole gimmick, they would marry well, very, very well together. But it's a bit absurd that he is such a big guy, but speaks the way he does. Not to say that it's a bad thing or anything, just the fact that you don't expect it. And he's basically dressing Orton down, but in such a convoluted way that it's almost a compliment.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the match, Randy Orton bumped for Keith Lee to try and make him look like a star, and it worked well. There was leapfrogs. There was Randy tried to punch him at one point, and Keith Lee caught his hand, and that's the thing for me that's quite interesting is he was willing to make Keith Lee, so they must have big plans for him. And I don't disagree. I think there is a huge star there. They certainly need to freshen Raw up with some guys at the top of the card. Keith Lee's a big dude, and Vince likes the big dudes. Asuka defeated Sasha Banks in what I still call a lumberjill match, but they're calling a lumberjack match. And we also saw Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax are going to be forced to team up to try and win the tag team championships Payback on Sunday. I think that's going to further the Nia Jax Shayna Baszler story. They're not going to get the belts. I'm not a fan of Nia Jax. I don't want to see her wrestling. Now, we kind of glossed over SummerSlam. And the reason I glossed over SummerSlam is because, Drew McIntyre retained his belt. The only real big deals would be what happened in the Universal Championship match on SmackDown. And it was announced on Raw that we're going to have a triple threat match on the pay-per-view on Sunday called Payback. And it's going to be the Fiend, who beat Braun Strowman for the belt at SummerSlam. So the Fiend, Braun Strowman, and Roman Reigns, who returned, it was mentioned by Gordy earlier, and Roman Reigns returned, and he mentioned Retribution in his promo. I don't think that he's going to be the leader of Retribution, but there is some talk that he is the leader of Retribution. So it's quite interesting where this could go. Certainly, if Braun and the Fiend do lose the belt to Roman, and Retribution kind of attach themselves to him, that would be certainly one way to go. But when they ended Raw, we did see two bigger guys, and the two bigger guys that have now kind of debuted in the Retribution stable, they went after Rey Mysterio and Dominic. The interesting thing here, Dominic looked great at SummerSlam for his first match. I mean, I'm very impressed with him. If anybody hasn't seen it, grab your weight. Great match. The storytelling is amazing, particularly when Dominic's mother starts coming out in the ring and Rey begs her not to get involved, and then Rey gets himself involved a few minutes later. What was interesting here was the Retribution had Dominic in the ring on his own, and Rey jumped in almost like, if you're going after my son, you have to come after me. So they did, and they destroyed him. Just as the Monday Night Messiah, Seth Rollins, stood on the entranceway watching and laughing. So Retribution not going after Seth Rollins, but happy to go after the baby faces. It's a weird one. I don't know how much of a fan I am of them just going after the baby faces. I think eventually they will have to go after some heels to show that it's not just a heel faction. They are after Retribution. You watch.
It depends on how they book it. I think that it could be a very clever thing. You know how we're talking about Bray Wyatt's like hurt heel theory. If they're Retribution, they're going after baby faces because they maybe have something to hide. They're not as good as we maybe think they are, and they want to uncover some secrets.
Yeah, perhaps. I mean, I think I want to see it evolve to not just be going after heels. But we're not the writers. We'll have to see where that goes. Now, let's move very quickly to NXT. This week, we mentioned that Karrion Kross won the title from Keith Lee, and he separated his shoulder. He came out on NXT on Wednesday at the start with a sling on his arm and revealed that he was having to relinquish the belt. So what they've done is they've decided to have a Iron Man match on next week's show, which I will tell you about in a second. We did have Breezango defeat Imperium to become the NXT Tag Team Champions, which I was shocked at. Breezango, yeah. I mean, they've really upped their game and became a lot more. They're still entertaining, but they're a lot more serious than they were before.
They're very talented, don't get me wrong, but they're up against Imperium.
I agree. But let's see where they go with Breezango. I certainly think Fandango's a great wrestler. Tyler Breeze clearly loves the business. So let's see where these guys...
I really like Tyler Breeze.
Yeah.
I really do. That documentary that you see with him backstage helping the NXT guys and basically having this small conference and explaining what his flaws were in that process. It's a really interesting thing to watch.
Yeah, we also saw the return of Tommaso Ciampa, who defeated Jake Atlas. Shotzi Blackheart defeated Maya Yim. Shotzi Blackheart's the one who has the tank. She drove the tank over Robert Stone's... Well, basically over Robert Stone's, if you need me to explain more what happened there. Yeah. So the William Regal announced a 4-way Iron Man match to determine the NXT champion next week. And Finn Balor, Tommaso Ciampa, Adam Cole, and Johnny Gargano will be in a 60-minute Iron Man match to crown a new NXT champion. Now, the Iron Man match basically is the people with the most pinfalls. So whoever has the most pinfalls in that 60 minutes will be the new NXT champion. For me, I would like to see Finn Balor get that and carry it for a while. Certainly given an opportunity to do something with it. I don't think Adam Cole should get it back. We need to freshen things up a little. NXT Cruiserweight Champion Santos Escobar, the guy who unmasked and had that great segment about a month ago, defeated Isaiah Swerve Scott. Kyle O'Reilly defeated Drake Maverick. Dakota Kai and Raquel Gonzalez defeated Io Shirai and Rhea Ripley. Rhea Ripley still looking like a star, but this is an NXT main evented by a women's tag team match. Dakota Kai is looking good. Io Shirai and Rhea Ripley looking good. Raquel Gonzalez, haven't seen enough of her, but she's still strong, which is, for me, I'm very happy to see somebody like Io Shirai doing well. I'm very happy to see Rhea Ripley doing well. Very happy to see Dakota Kai doing well. Raquel Gonzalez, I haven't seen enough of to make my mind up yet. But compared to the AEW women's division, I think NXT, they feature people every week. They have people in storylines, and we're not seeing 4 people, and then 3 weeks later it's another 4 people, and then 3 weeks later another 4 people. So NXT for me has been very promising, and this is the thing that I think we have a 10-year age gap, so we should like different things, shouldn't we? We should look at different things in wrestling, and we should like different things. But I think, strangely, we like quite a lot of the same thing. So when it comes to NXT, you watched some of it when our son woke up at 3 a.m. What did you think of what you saw of TakeOver?
I think it was a well-produced show. Certainly, there's a lot of feuds in there, but because I don't actually watch NXT, there's not a lot of knowledge for me of the feuds and the build-up.
For the first time, we're going to be featured on The Same Shot. Hello.
Hi.
So one of the things that we used to do when we just did this as a radio show, we used to do a video of the week. We used to put something up on our Facebook page, which was designed for you to be able to go and see for free through Facebook or YouTube or wherever it was. But this week, it's not so much about something I think you can go and watch right now. It's one of these things that I've been looking forward to since it was announced, and I really want people to go and see it when it comes out. It's not going to be going in the cinema here in the UK. I think we can definitely say that. But it is going to be available at drive-in theaters in America, and it's going to have a digital on-demand release on August the 28th, which is today. So that's one of the things that I really want to hype about this. This documentary is 20 years in the making. It's called You Cannot Kill David Arquette, and it kind of looks at the fact that there's an actor married to one of the stars of Friends who went on to be WCW World Heavyweight Champion. It chronicles his journey back to the squared circle, where he attempted to right some of the past wrongs and redeem himself amongst wrestling fans, and that resulted in him actually going out and pounding the roads as a wrestler. He went out and he wrestled in hardcore matches, he wrestled on indie shows, he wrestled I think he wrestled most weekends for quite a few months. But what it does do, it also looks at the fact that one of the downsides on his WCW run was that his star power waned in Hollywood, and Arquette even states in You Cannot Kill David Arquette that he's been typecast as a wacky guy, and he's not really been able to land a serious role in a decade. His health issues have actually included depression and anxiety, including several other things. He had a memorable episode where he had a reaction to ketamine during a supervised treatment to help with depression in a doctor's office. He also has a heart condition. He had a heart attack, which is another stumbling block when it comes to being a wrestler. You certainly can't get a medical license to wrestle in some states if you've had a heart attack. But he began his tour 2 years ago, and it was met with a mixed reaction with fans and pundits sharing the opinion that we didn't want it the first time, why did we want a second one? But he went out, he performed in front of 50 fans, he performed in front of 1,000 fans, he gave up smoking, he did all these things to try and show that he's a wrestling fan and he wanted to prove his worth. One of the things that's quite interesting though is that he didn't want to be WCW champion. It was a suggestion of Tony Schiavone to Vince Russo. And he's like, I don't want to do this. But, he's promoting a movie. He's working with a company. He kind of wants to do it. So I personally can't wait to watch this. I'm probably going to try and get it on over the weekend and subject you to it as well. So what do you think of, the story of David Arquette. What do you think of him coming back as a wrestler?
I like David Arquette. I've seen a lot of his stuff. I think that his run in WCW, although it got a lot of backlash, it was a very interesting thing to watch. Certainly in terms of getting wrestling out there on the mainstream, having people talk about it, getting the news and the headlines. David Arquette is now WCW champion was the biggest thing for over a year.
It was on USA Today. Kurt Russell did a free promo. Courtney Cox appeared on the show. David Arquette didn't just wrestle one match and then hand the title back. He wrestled at several shows. He also turned his back on DDP and became allies with Jeff Jarrett. He was involved for a while. He lived the dream that most of us want to watch.
I mean, he could have hypothetically done what Brock Lesnar did, what Goldberg did, where he just took the belt and he was the champion, but not a champion.
Yeah.
But the fact that he had the respect enough for the talent, for the business, and for that art to go out knowing that he would probably get his ass handed to him and constantly just keep going with that.
Well,
and the fact that he would come back to do it as well, aware of what the backlash might be, I think it's really interesting. It's definitely something that I'm going to be watching.
Well, he's earned some respect. He does have some friends in the business. Jungle Boy, who David Arquette, I believe, was friends with his father. What's quite interesting, the film premiere actually happened this week, and some AEW guys, some indie guys were there. But one of the things I'm looking forward to seeing is the story of the match with Nick Gage. Now, I believe I mentioned this to you, where Nick Gage, he's the criminal who's been convicted of armed robbery and several other things, who has at one point or another owned a company or a wrestling school, and he's a garbage wrestler as far as some people are concerned. And him and David Arquette had a match, and it's what is classed as a near-death experience for David Arquette. So I think it's going to be quite interesting to see how this all plays out, because the cameras were there for that match. So I'll be fascinated to see how that turns out.